Stream is live, Dave. Excellent. Hello and welcome to the Transfer Podcast, our first live YouTube broadcast. Myself and Dave here doing the transfer show for Anfield Index, and we're very excited about the show to come up because you know us. It's a little bit early in the day for all this crack, but me and Dave can't help ourselves. And if there's anything worthy of a bit of transfer gossip, we like to talk about it. And we know you like to talk about it. So stop lying to yourselves and let's just revel in some transfer chat. Dave, how you doing, my friend?
Mate, honestly, I was thinking today, Arne Slot's come in and done what he's done. Brilliant. The Reds are 5 points clear at the top of the league. A perfect record in the Champions League. That's erotic. The only sort of small hemorrhoid on the arse of anything right now could just be the contract situation, which obviously everyone's talking about, and potential transfers, which gets everyone like us excited. So we are facing into it and we're going to see if we can make it a full hat trick of good stuff.
Let's get that cream applied to said hemorrhoid and see if we can get rid of it. And just so everybody knows what it is we're planning for the show this evening, Dave's laid out a sort of a running order for us. We're going to start with those contracts because why would you not? It's what everyone's talking about. We'll move on then to some of the major links that are floating around in relation to the Reds. And yes, it does include the Mountain lad and the lad from Real Madrid. We'll get to that. We'll talk then about our forward line in sort of tangential to transfers, because there are some attackers being linked to the Reds as well. And so that makes us then have to think about our own current existing forwards who might be making way, whether soon or at the end of the season or whatever. And then finally, we'll finish with some chat about the defence. There's been an awful lot of left back talk. And of course, one of the contract situations is our man, Trent. So let's start with the contracts, Dave. It's sort of obsessing everybody. And I think it went from a situation where if you were talking about it, you were kind of getting tutted by people saying, don't worry, it's going to happen. Trust the system, trust the club, trust in everything. And then even those people started to get nervous. And then I was amongst that lot. You know, I wasn't ever preaching. I don't like preaching to people. So I was just kind of saying, okay, I wish it was done. I think it should be done, especially when we had almost zero incomings. We took a punt on a lad who turns out is a wonderfully talented footballer, but potentially a real sick note. So we had minimum risk by the ownership group. Yes, we understood, didn't we, Dave, that getting Slot on board, and I had Jan waxing lyrical about that on Mulby on the spot last week, and he's right. It is the key appointment, and it has proven to be. And he was saying, you know, those lads are going to be sitting down, having a cup of tea every day, quite happy with themselves. Like we've nailed this. Whereas the rest of us are saying, Jesus, we want more footballers because we're fans, and that's what we do. We thought at least the consolation prize, Dave, would be that the contracts would get done quickly. It's not like it's small potatoes. It's Virgil van Dijk. It's Mo Salah, the two most consequential players of our recent history. And it's Trent Alexander-Arnold, who may well be the most consequential player of Liverpool's history in terms of all of those three put together, if he stays around and continues to add to his legacy. This is not small potatoes, like I said. It feels to me like there's a bit of progress being made with some of them. So why don't we start with the one that you feel is most concrete? And I think it'll be the one that will be least surprising to people, because we've heard several little bits about it that have been quite positive. Let's start with Virgil van Dijk, because it does seem like there's progress being made there, and it's a matter of dotting I's and crossing T's, or at least that's what my hopeful brain is telling me, Dave.
Seems crazy, doesn't it, that on the very last show of last summer, we said at least as we steer towards the next ones in December, Christmas, around whenever it would be, at least we'd be talking about the contracts as a positive and a lift. And nada. But trying to give a bit of hope without killing the audience straight away, Trev. We've been doing the normal digging, asking around, doing all the bits we can. Virgil van Dijk does seem to be sort of the closest one. In fact, from sort of haranguing, asking, messaging, chatting to people, all those types of things, all the suggestions are pretty much unanimous across the board. And I'm going to use that word because I'm not going to use it with all the others, and I'll explain why. But unanimous across the board, this seems the closest, that pretty much a few people are saying, yeah, this is going to get done. Simple as that. So it's done when he's signed. It's done when he's doing the Axeline and we're doing the presentation. But in terms of the info that we're getting, Virgil very much seems to be the closest, as it were.
Now, I'm going to poke at you a bit more about this because I do want to find out if there's any specifics in terms of what you've heard, because I heard some things that were, to me, sounded like spoofery. It was people saying things like he wants 3, the club are offering 2, but it looks like they're going to be able to come to some sort of arrangement, that type of thing. So that's where I want you to drive the bus in a second. But first of all, before you do that, let's, because this is a wider ranging chat here, people will understand we're going live. You may see I've forgotten to remove my coat. I'm just in from work, so people can get the opinion that this is, we're actually doing this on the fly, but we have given it some thought. Of course, Dave has in advance. So I just want to get your take on why you would be optimistic about Virgil, and more to the point, like, what are the alternatives for Virgil? Because when it comes to talking about Trent later on, the alternatives are plain as day because they have been writ large all over the media, and they are in the form of a white shirted club that nobody can really say no to, it appears. So, but with Virgil, there's a world where he signs for Real and they're delighted to get him. But does it seem likely to you? Because to me, I feel like this is a guy who came into his own fully as a footballer and a world star, wearing our crest, and now he's the captain of the club. I don't see a way that he leaves if he gets something close to what he wants. That's where my optimism comes from, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, the first part of that, I've seen reports on this, and I've seen journalists saying it, and even Carragher mentioned it about, well, he's of a certain age, so his options are limited. I mean, what are we talking about? We're talking about the world's best centre-back on a free transfer, Trev. That's what we're talking about. And yes, I know his age will play a part, as in that will come into the thinking. But exactly as you said, I mean, look at all the centre-back issues the likes of Real Madrid have right now. I mean, name any of the big clubs on the continent and tell me who wouldn't want Virgil van Dijk in their team. I just think, for me, that is absolute nonsense. I don't buy into this. Virgil's options are limited. There would be a lot of clubs on the continent and around, but let's be honest, Premier League as well, that would like Virgil van Dijk in their team. Make zero mistake about that at all. The second part, which I think is quite interesting, from all the suggestions we've got, it's not about money. It is the length of contract and that discussion. And this is the bit where we always say, we tell you what we know. Sometimes we don't. So I'm not going to say here, I know it's he wants 4 and the club are offering 3, 2 and 1. That all we got told when we were haranguing people was the length of the contract is part of the discussion at the moment and finalising that. But there does seem to be a suggestion from everyone we're talking to that there is confidence around that ultimately. So in terms of where we are most hopeful at the moment, and we can only base it on what we're told or what we can find out, Virgil's probably top of the confidence tree right now.
And with those little snippets going around, and it's, it's come from various little places, you'd be confident enough. And, look, it's playing silly beggars to be doing your amateur psychology, but this is a happy camp, and you can't fake that crap. You just can't. Our lads, they look genuinely happy, and it's the comparative happiness of Virgil as I see him going around the place, and calm, quiet, sort of contented sort of air that I get off him, and the fact that he started the season like a house on fire, that's really helping me think this is going to get done. And these same parameters extend to our second port of call for discussion here, which is Mo Salah, who has already thrown out numbers that are outrageous and that are, comparable to anyone across the continent. He is getting himself into brackets with Thierry Henry and the likes. He is looking like he could be what I've always suspected he really would like to be, which is, an all-time Premier League record setter in X, Y, and Z category. I feel like that matters to Mo Salah. And the more you see him talk, and most people watching this show today will have seen the recent footage with Kelly Dalglish where he's having a chat, and the lads himself and Allison, and I think it's Robbo, are reminiscing on some big moments in the recent past. And we see Mo happy and content. And just because he won't, go all out and say, I want to stay here for the rest of my life, people think, I don't know. But he looks too contented to me. I feel like he also couldn't probably go anywhere better. Yeah, of course. Would the aforementioned clubs take him? Would Bayern take him? Would Real take him? Of course they'd take him. That's not the point. The point is, he seems to me like a guy who is in the middle of it, building a legacy, not finished it. And that's where my, again, optimism comes from. And again, I could be seeing that with rose-tinted glasses. I think I possibly am. I think I might be seeing what I want to see. We're all guilty of confirmation bias. I watch interviews like that and I say, that guy, he just looks content and I feel confident about it. Now, spoiler alert, I don't feel that way about Trent currently. But for the Mo conversation, do we have any specifics at all? Because this one is as vague as hell. And we saw his pal and agent, Rami, coming out again, and he was making it his business to connect with various fan media and saying, look, I just want it out there that nobody knows anything, which is, of course, always my default setting with transfers. Yours too, right? We come on here and go, nobody knows anything until we do. And if we do, we'll tell you. Where are you on this?
This one, I actually agree with you wholeheartedly. From everything I'm seeing, and even that roundtable discussion thing, which was brilliant today, by the way, but the interview we've seen after the United game, the way it's reported, I think everyone believes, or most people, it's fair to say, believe Mo Salah wants to stay at Liverpool. This is a happy camper, as you said before. This is an elite player who's the world's best on form currently as well. I mean, all the stats show you, and his stats show you he's the best almost ever he's been. He's 67 minutes per goal or assist. His best ever season on that so far. It's just everything works that way. This is a tough negotiation. That's how Liverpool see it, is what we've been told, because of how much Mo Salah earns. I mean, people quote that 350 grand a week figure, don't they, Trev? But that is Mo's base salary, with things like the add-ons, the bonuses, etc. As a Harvard research paper showed, Mo Salah earns over £1 million a week at Liverpool Football Club. That's not a secret, that's known. So that is a big financial outlay. Pay it. Do not care. This is an elite player. You see his mentality, his ability, everything we're seeing is elite. I don't really want to use another word for it. You've just got to pay and get it done. In terms of the latest we've got from sort of asking around, they're definitely in talks. The club are definitely in talks with Rami, Mo Salah. A little bit on Rami, because you saw him retweet the whole nobody knows. From all suggestions, that was aimed at our good old friend Florian Plettenberg, who released his little tweet, didn't he, to say, Liverpool and Mo are talking, but they're miles apart. I mean, of course, a Bundesliga pundit who's in a German Bayern Munich's back pocket would, of course, have the scoop on Mo Salah at Liverpool and all that. So that was where we're understanding that was directed. And Rami's kind of right, but maybe not in a bad way. Rami plays his little games a bit, doesn't he, Trev? And that's not always a bad thing, because sometimes Rami is usually playing his little games when we're in the business end of discussions, aren't we? So usually you hope things are just progressing. And again, maybe that's a false hope, but that's the hope we're all building it on, and the hope that Mo Salah clearly wants to stay. The only sort of other factual bit we've got in regards to Mo Salah's contract negotiation, Adidas has come up as a discussion point, because naturally they'll move to Adidas, don't they, for next season? They're currently with Nike. Mo Salah is an Adidas athlete. So that's become a bit of a talking point in the contract negotiations, is what we got in the last few days, that almost Liverpool suggesting, well, you can kind of do like more of the marketing and the promotion for free, Whereas Mo Salah's along the lines of, well, no, you should still pay me what you pay me like the night deal. Let's, and all this. To be honest, do we really care, Trev? Just pay him what he gets under his night deal. Basically, this is the player that elite. I know we're saying Virgil is the best in the world central defender. Not disagreeing with that for 1 second. We stand by that. Mo is an attacker. Mo's mentality, as you saw in that round table thing, is just absolutely sensational. It's almost, for me, of the belief, you can't buy that. You can't replace it. What you would want to do is keep Mo, then get someone in who you feel could be the next Mo to study under the current Mo, so he becomes the next Mo. So hopefully, if Dickie Hughes is watching, I said Mo enough that you will just get a signature on a piece of paper. Don't worry about the numbers. Just get a signature. We'll deal with the rest later. But it just has to get done, Mo Salah. And I've been on shows and I've hosted, and people will know, say, oh, you've heard people talk about 2 years, 3 years. Everyone's got their opinion on that. If it takes 3 years, so be it. I don't personally believe there will be a decline. If there is a little bit, so what? One journalist made a really good point today as well. If there is this decline, say it is 3 years, and we're hypothesizing a bit here, Trev, we know this, but say it is 3 years and we do see a decline in the third year. Do you think someone with the mentality of Mo Salah is going to want to stick around and be a bench option? No, if there's a year left on his contract, he will be pushing like, no, I'm Mo Salah, I'm first teamer. He's not, so they make that money back anyway. So whether it's 3 years, just get it done.
Yeah, I love that extra bit on Adidas. I think that's really interesting. And we can see now where the complications might be coming in and just how, impactful they might be in terms of any decisions that are getting made about remuneration for Mo, because that throws a spanner in the works for sure. And it's an added complication that maybe, certainly I wasn't aware of until this evening and having this chat with you. And this is where you always bring the goods. I'm very interested that you drove the bus to that particular point that you did at the end of the conversation. That's where I was going with a question to you really quick. Because a lot of fans, of course, are amateur accountants. A lot of fans worry about FSG's money like it's their own. A lot of fans then, if they hear someone like myself saying just pay the money, think, well, that's incredibly naive. And you do not understand, football economics. So I have a very simple sort of default answer for all of that. Yes. And I don't care, because again, I don't really care about, I'm call it old school, but Shankly used to talk about how the directors were there to sign the checks, right? I think Clough said something similar, and it's overly simplistic. And yes, I understand we can all take a sort of pride in the way our club is run, Dave, but it doesn't keep us warm at night, man. What keeps us warm at night is trophies and being in the run for trophies, being in the reckoning for said trophies. So I want to ask you, is it, like, I've heard you say it, but I just want to double down on this. Is there any way at all in which, like, unless it's absurd, you don't pay the man his money for you? Because I think most fans are looking at this guy's output, and I really love that little twist you put on it. So there is a falling off in year 3. Again, like you said, he might be 36 or 35 at the time, but he will then go, Saudi, here I come, and we'll get a boatload of money for him, or whatever it happens to be. So it's not going to be a situation, or even we'll get him off our books, whatever it happens to be. There's no way you don't pay the man what he feels he is worth within reason. I don't see us being held hostage by Mo Salah. I think all we're trying to do, and all the club should be trying to do, is maintain the services of a once-in-a-generation footballer. Is it that clear-cut for you?
Yeah, there's a question and a statement to it for me. I suppose the big question would be, if it's a question of cost, if Mo Salah goes, how much is it going to cost to replace him in terms of what you lose? And in fact, you talk about these players, Trev, that probably you are not going to get just one player to replace him. It almost like FSG Moneyball. You're going to have to replace him in the aggregate, aren't you? You probably have to do a couple of signings. If it will cost a fortune as a collective even. So that's the question bit. The second bit that resonates with me is it's almost a statement, but we keep hearing it. And I do believe this. Mickey Edwards, all the suits upstairs, etc. We've got the smartest operators. That's the phrase you hear, isn't it? The smartest operators in club football, and they will back themselves, okay? Well, if they're smart operators, it's a stupid move to not renew Mo Salah.
Couldn't put it better myself. Let's get to the thorny issue of the Trent Alexander-Arnold discussion, because there's a lot more moving parts here in many ways. There's the player's comparative youth. Yeah. There is his comparative saleability backed on that. There is the fact that there's been openly acknowledged interest from a club which actually features one of his best pals, and a club where you could see him thinking, and listen, don't underestimate this. I think some people are naive about this kind of stuff. He is the age he is. Or I'm an old bastard, so I predate PlayStation. But that generation does not. And you see the excitement when the lads get their little packages saying what their relative stats are and all the rest of it. So what I'm saying is, and I don't take this the wrong way. What I'm saying is, you have a fella here who is faced with the realistic possibility of performing with, the Harlem Globetrotters of football, the undisputed biggest club in the world, and their recent record has just nailed it down for at least another couple of decades. Yeah. It's impossible for a fella not to consider what that might be like for him to be playing there. And the change on the back of Klopp leaving must have been massively tempting. Here's where I'm hopeful. A lot of the conversation was around the idea that these guys wanted to see what Arne Slot was going to be like. They wanted to see what life was like under Arne Slot. Read the comments from Robbo today. Read those comments. Could not be more in praise of the manager and his staff, talking about him and Mo were always first to training and last to leave, and now they're being beaten to training by these guys, and those guys are still there after Mo and Rob will leave. Praising the work ethic, but more to the point, the quality of the work that's being done. And you can't fool these guys. They've had Jurgen Klopp as their gaffer for years. You can't fool them. They're not going to just buy any old shit story that comes out. They're going to have to be impressed. It seems to me, Dave, like they're impressed. Now, Trent has also been very complimentary, whilst also being, I suppose, a little bit less than committed in the clear language that people will want to hear him say. There are things going around this evening, Dave, from, I don't know whether they're reputable sources or not, for the first time in a while that I've heard that are quite positive, saying that he has an interest in staying because he wants to, cement his legacy, become club captain, all those kind of things. Again, I don't know if this is fanciful. There are, like I say, moving parts here. Can you fill us in on some of them as far as you're concerned and what you think is going on?
Yeah, it really is. And I don't want to say now or never, because with a talent as good as Trent's, that there'll always be options if he ever wanted it in the future. But it does kind of feel like the pivot point, doesn't it, in terms of the time left on the contract, where he is in his career, the way things have changed. And we have to take our Liverpool hats off for a second, Trev, and be completely honest. Of course, any offer from Real Madrid and playing with his pal and all the stuff that we know, people, of course it's going to divert his eye. There's no two ways about that. You can't pretend anything different. Like you said, the big hope is he seems to be thriving more than ever, especially from a defensive side under Arne Slot. You've heard Trent talk about, the coaching, the way he's developing. Interesting that bit where he's almost given Slot carte blanche, as he said the other day, to be critical, really try and develop me as a player. So there's so much that you're thinking that's good. And again, you were right the way you phrased it. we can sometimes hear what we want to hear, but, it's always good to try and give the full context on it. I'm going to be deadly honest on this. I've heard the opposite from people that I really value or trust or we get info from. And honestly, now there's a bit to this, because one of the people that, we get info from and we're very reliant on did say, confident, yeah, all the suggestions are there talking, there's an open dialogue, confident. Confident can't sign a contract though, can it, Trev? That's the thing as well. It doesn't mean it's a wrong assessment, but that's the little bit, okay, that's confident. The other side is, as you know, another person who we get good info from was saying that there was a huge offer made to Trent Alexander-Arnold that wasn't accepted. That doesn't mean, just to be clear, nothing's been broken off, all this, blah, blah, blah. But there's nothing like that we have that's close. And by the way, as we said before, that is just the info we got. I would love nothing more than, almost as we're doing this pod, there was breaking news that he signed. But Trent is the one that, I suppose, and you ask me, for my personal opinion, it could be 2-2 and getting 27. Every single stack of chips is on Trent's side of the table. Because ultimately, Liverpool cannot let a £150 million asset walk out the door for free. From a pure, if you're talking pure money, as we said earlier, that's the money element, which means, yes, you're trying to negotiate, haggle. I get all that aspect, but if you have to pay him a bit more than you want to, so be it. I honestly just think this is a situation where everything is in Trent's sort of atmosphere. He will decide what he wants to do, won't he? If he wants to sign a renew at Liverpool, he will sign it. If he wants to go and test himself in Madrid, he will have that offer. It's also the toughest one to predict, because you've seen the media briefings and obviously from the various journos that we talked to, Trent and Liverpool are very much keen to keep everything under wraps. So I don't think we're going to get maybe too much breaking until it just breaks one way or the other, shall we say, Trev? So this is the one that I'm just going to be honest, we didn't really get a real read on it, bar the two contrasting opinions. So in summary, not a fucking clue.
I mean, fair, right? Because nobody does. To echo back to the William Goldman assertion, nobody knows anything, and until we do. But I'm going to push you on it again, because I want your gut feeling on this, like I got from you on the other two as well. Because my gut feeling on it, I can't trust it. I can't trust it because I really don't know. I find Trent's poker face on this, the overall output of what he said, to be very difficult to read. I also feel the temptation is on a different level than it is for the other two, because for the other two, I think it would be primarily financial. For Trent, there's a different aspect to it that we have to factor in. And like I said, we can't be naive about what it would be like to be in that generation and getting the opportunity to play with Mbappe and his big mate Jude. We can't factor that in. What I do want to know, though, is what your gut feeling is as to whether it gets done. This is not to put you on the spot like Brian Moore and Kevin Keegan all those years ago. I just really would like to get a feel from you where it is, because I think at the end of the day, if I had to roll a dice, and I'm not really much of a betting man, I would say all three stay. I don't know why that is. It's just the feeling I have. But with the other two, I'm confident. With this one, I'm not. But I just think overall the package might be, we're really into this Arne Slot era, and maybe there's been enough on display, enough impressiveness on display to convince them to sign those contracts. And Trent will know that it's not over for him. 2 years' time, he could go anyway. You know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah. And listen, this is my opinion, so it doesn't really count for everything. Everyone's got one, haven't they, as the classic saying goes. If I had to bet, like you said, to give that analogy, Virgil, yes. Mo, yes. Trent, I'm not confident on this one at all. And I'm desperate to be wrong like you. We all, of course, we want all three to renew. But if you're asking me honestly what my gut is telling me now, which doesn't mean much in the grand context of contract renewals, I'm struggling to see Trent as it stands.
I think that's fair, and his status as the most saleable asset is a huge factor in this regardless, when we are supposed to believe that our lot are ruthless business people first and last. So it's worth thinking about that as well. Perhaps the era of sentiment did end with the Kloppo days, so people might want to consider that too. Okay, we should keep moving, because if we don't, we won't get through what we want to talk about. Let's get to some of the tasty transfer tales that we're hearing. And there are two stories in particular that I want to talk to you about. One is obviously the previous flirtation with Zubamendi, and whether or not you think that might be rekindled, or whether it has been, or whether there's anything going on in the background. In fact, I think you might have some news for us about that player in another club. And then, of course, there was all these Tchouaméni stories. Again, I'm never sure how fanciful these are. You know, the origins of them are always a little bit, well, do I trust this? Do I trust it or not? Both of those would be pretty monumental signings. Either or would be pretty much in exactly the bracket that we were looking for, that would really make a difference to our team, and especially that midfield area that we all have. I think everyone, bar the most sort of benighted souls who are just trusting everything, you know, for the cause, are clearly of the opinion that, yeah, we've been chasing a defensive midfielder for a few seasons. Chances are we really could do with one. And the other one, of course, is the idea of the left-sided defender, whether someone who can play centre half or exclusively fullback, or a combo of both. Let's start with the midfielders, Tchouaméni and Zubamendi. Tell us what you know about both of them, and if there's anything at all that's tangible there in terms of January to come.
I tell you what, Trev, David Ornstein and Miguel Delaney really pissed me off today, because you saw I sent it to Agenda right at the start of the week. And I was like, right, we've got a bit of stuff, we'll go into this. And then the two buggers went and wrote about it today, didn't they? Specifically Zubamendi and those situations. So, yeah, I don't think it's kind of will be a massive surprise to anyone. Is Liverpool have kept good relations with Zubamendi's agent, sort of that channel open. Liverpool still very much like this player. And there's also the element that everyone was like, okay, what's going to happen? And it would die when he signed that new deal with Sociedad. There's been no new deal, hasn't he? And even people are looking today that Sociedad's sporting director is set to go as well, so that, you know, you can read into that. We don't know if it's linked, but there's a lot of things going forward that way. The problem is, at the same time, and again, I don't think this is going to surprise many people, that speaking to various journalists as we do, Manchester City have got an interest in Zubamendi, especially for potentially January. However, this is important to say, because we chased around, is there any chance that there's no indication on any part that Zubamendi will, A, be willing to, or B, that Sociedad will sanction? You know, I know people are going to jump on the release clause thing, but there's nothing that indicates the sort of a willingness to move in January. So that is an important part to say. I don't know, I can't say that even if there is a move in the reckoning, that it won't be till the summer. So that's the important part that we got as well. But there is a lot of interest still from Liverpool and from others in Martin Zubamendi. So that's the first one to say. Tchouaméni, a name that's been linked with Liverpool for many years, mainly under Jurgen Klopp. And a lot of people, I've seen all sorts on Twitter about it. And naturally, as we do, and asking, sort of trying to dig around, we came to the grand score of getting absolutely zero on this. I've got to be honest, Trev. If it is happening and there is something there at all, we know absolutely zero about it. Because from everyone asking around and all the things we did, this feels like one of those ones we called in the summer a manifestation style signing, if you know what I mean. I think it kind of came from a link and all that type of thing. That, you know, that there's been a few shows where people have talked about it. The profile of that midfielder we're looking at, that it's not the old sort of destroyer. And this is not belittling Tchouaméni, who's a fantastic player, by the way, but profile might come into it. You could argue that. But in simple terms, from asking around as much as we can, nada on Tchouaméni, something on Zubamendi.
Yeah, it did feel always as if, like I said, the Tchouaméni stuff was a sort of a an opportunity for people to drive a few clicks, because maybe they thought, well, he's a little bit unsettled where he is, or whatever it happens to be. And when you've got a squad the size of Real Madrid's squad, there's always going to be someone who's on the outs, right? So then you look around and you go, well, Liverpool could do with a player, and they were chasing a midfielder. So it always seemed a little bit fanciful to me, that one. And like you say, if there's not even any smoke, then we can, I think, pretty happily extinguish the fire on that one. The fact that the Zubimendi thing lives on is not going to be a surprise to anybody, because it was such a close run thing that, given that the fact that things haven't been exactly stellar since for the player, then maybe you would be, it would be understandable that he might be reconsidering his options. But now that you've mentioned City, that's a little bit of a worry. Of course, a lot would depend, I would imagine, on whether our prissy cardigan wearing pal on the sideline there over at the Manchester City would be willing to stay around for long enough to please Zubimendi, because again, you get sold, don't you, on the gaffer and the future of the club as opposed to what it might be. That's the two big stories that we have been hearing on a regular basis in terms of the midfield. But it's not just midfield, is it? Because we've got two other lines to look at. We'll go on to the forward line, because let's face it, it's a bit sexier. And we have a situation, Dave, at the moment where, so we have a group of attackers. We've got Chiesa, we've got Nunez, Diaz, Jota, we've got Mo Salah, and we've got Harvey Elliott, who's fitting in there now at the moment, if we're being perfectly honest. And now that he's back available to play, it looks like he's back training. It's hard to see him getting a game in midfield. So that's where he has been fitting in for Slot. If he's going to, it looks like that would be the thing. So we have a roster of very, very good players. I don't know if I mentioned Gakpo there. Obviously, I should have. For the first time in a long time, I won't say well stocked and we don't need to do anything, but it is very healthy and the competition's fantastic. And to see Diaz and Gakpo driving each other to heights, to see, it would be lovely to have someone pushing Mo a little bit more, but we don't need to when he's throwing out numbers like he's currently throwing out. And to have that sort of, potential for changing up the number 9 situation is good as well. But a lot of people are starting to look at the players that we have and question whether or not long-term they're going to be the thing, whether they're going to be the thing under Arne Slot, or if they're ever really just going to, hit the ground the way that we wanted them. Obviously, Darwin's the big one there, because Darwin would be, I think, potentially someone who might be attractive to other clubs. He's a player who divides opinion. He's by far the most popular player I think since back in the day when I was going and watching Liverpool and Robbie Fowler was playing. I've never seen such devotion from the fan base to a player. I swear to God. I mean, some of the best players in the world that we've had, Luis Suarez, Mo Salah, haven't inspired this sort of blind devotion in the ground. Outside the ground, it's a different thing. In this world that we're in here, the online world of unreality, although hello people in the comments, we know you're real. It's a different situation and people are a little bit more critical. So let's talk about who we have, and then maybe by dint of that you may be able to introduce who it is we might be looking at, because there are 3 names that we need to touch off at least. I don't think any of them will be any surprise to people, because they've been mentioned regularly, and I'd like to see how you think they might fit in. So can you just begin by giving me your assessment of our current roster of attackers and who you think might be sort of vulnerable to being moved on in favor of new talent?
Yeah, I'll be honest, it was interesting with the forward line, because from the info we got, I wouldn't say it was like jaw-dropping, but it quite surprised me. And if you think about it, the age profile plays a part. I mean, we've dealt with Mo Salah. We've already talked about him. We know what we want to happen. As you said, I think the one to almost dismiss it as well, in a good way, is Cody Gakpo, who's settled, doing well, all those types of things. The Nunez conundrum, as you said, Nunez, like the devotion is unwavering. the big thing about Darwin is no one's really fully sure at the moment. It was quite clear. And by the way, the powers that be, the people who are in charge were quite keen that when they came back in the summer to make it abundantly clear that under their watch, the Darwin Núñez probably wouldn't have been signed, for that fee, the profile. They were desperate to make that abundantly clear through all the normal sources. So there's that. So
that's an important point, Dave. That's an important point. We can't skip over that because that story felt like it was planted for all of us to see, and it felt really deliberately done. And I thought it was shitty at the time, I'll be honest with you, because I was thinking, because I'm as much of a Darwinite as anyone else, and I don't want to see the guy moving on. I thought I didn't like the feeling I got from that and the idea that story was planted. So it's important to mention that. I think you're right. Sorry, finish out your point, and then I'll start leading you back to who our potential replacements or additions might be.
100%. So there's that one. So that throws the question mark. And we have to be honest about this season. This is Darwin's third season, so it really is now or never. I think as you're starting to hear a few people say that at early doors, we had the whole, if he just gets that coolness, that refinement in his finishing, he'll be there. I think this is Darwin Núñez, to be honest now, and what he is because of his age. So that will play a part. So there is a question mark against Darwin Núñez. There wasn't really anything more than that, but just, again, from asking around, that was what we got. The two I'm going to group together, which was really interesting for me, and the juicy bit of all of it that I got, Diogo Jota and Luis Diaz. People are going to say, why are you grouping these two together? Because of the info and the way it was put to us. Both will be 28 in the summer, Trev. Both will have 2 years left on their deal. Now, we know, and again, from all the briefings, etc., Liverpool do not want to be caught in another situation that 2 years is that mark, isn't it? It's renewal. We don't want to get to a year. No one wants to do that unless it's a plan already to run it down. So those two players are both 28 and get 2 years in the summer. Remember that. Here's the variation between the two. Since being at Liverpool, Diogo Jota had a renewal and a wage bump. Okay? Luis Diaz has not. Now, I know there was a lot of reports suggesting that Luis Diaz was on, I think the rumoured figures are 55k or something. I wouldn't say paltry because, in football terms it's small, but in real terms, obviously, it's a king's ransom. But the key thing we got sort of in this information was that Liverpool were probably more comfortable with giving Diaz a bump for that reason. And also, if Diogo Jota was going to renew further, let's be honest, Trev, he's going to want another bump, isn't he? So what's he going to want? And the other side to Diogo Jota is, and whether he's just greatly unlucky, whatever it may be, however you see it, Diogo Jota gets a lot of injuries. There's no two ways about it at all. So would FSG, Liverpool, however you want to put it, be prepared to give top money? And the suggestions are Diogo might well be looking for top money as well to a guy that maybe only gets on the pitch between 20 to 30 times a year. We know how good his strike rate is. We know the slaughter, all those types of things. The question mark around Diogo Jota is availability, isn't it? And we've seen that year on year on year. It's that simple. So just when it was broke down to me, that's what I found most interesting. The similarity, Jota and Diaz, 28 in the summer, both of them. 2 years left on their deal, both of them. Jota has already had a bump. In fact, Diaz is only really the attacker in the modern era of the starters that's not had a wage bump, since he got there. They all got it, the original three and all that, Jota. So that's one to keep an eye on. But, and this is me guessing, by the way, because this is what we do in the transfer show, I struggle to see Liverpool, and knowing how they work, being prepared to give both those players an extension at 28 in the summer.
It's for people's edification. It's probably worth digging up a tweet by Cybrundus during the week where he outlined the availability. There was a graph, one of those very sort of illustrative graphs, which showed Diogo Jota's availability for Liverpool. Now, I could be wrong, but I felt at the time it was something like 40-something odd percent of the matches that he's missed. That's consequential, and it could have a massive bearing on the decision that you're talking about. Now, let's get to the sort of spicy bit, because there are three names I'm going to throw at you. You take them in whatever order you want. But we have seen stories to do with Mbeumo. We've seen stories to do with this Marmoush. I was going to say kid, but he's 25. And we've seen stories to do with Semenyo. I'm interested a lot in all of them for different reasons. I think they'd all be fascinating signings, but you're the man with the inside move. So talk to us. Do you want to start with Marmoush?
That's the right place to start, based on the info that, obviously, from asking around that we've got. Liverpool are red hot on this guy, Trev. To give an example of how red hot they are, they're as red hot if you found Kate Beckinsale naked in front of a fire toasting her buns. That's the indication we're getting that Liverpool really, really like Marmoush. However, the other side is Liverpool can't have 7 forwards, can they? Because that's just utterly ridiculous. So one would probably have to go. But for the first bit, Liverpool absolutely, all the info we're getting is Liverpool really like Marmoush. And I saw some people say, and I don't pretend I know him inside out, that he could be a Salah replacement. From asking about that, everything we got, like, not a chance. Different profile of player, doesn't really play on the right side, tends to be more left and moving up to the middle on occasions. You know, absolutely flying for Eintracht Frankfurt, isn't he, this season? You see Marcus Kroescher, I think it's pronounced, I'm probably butchering that name, come out and say that, yeah, the nature of our club for the right price, the links have been with Build, but for this one, absolutely red hot was the indication we were getting on this. Liverpool are very much interested in Marmoush.
Just on this guy, right? You mentioned the fact that he plays for Eintracht Frankfurt. I have Wikipedia stats, so I'm not going to claim that they are the be-all and end-all. Never trust Wikipedia because it can be edited. However, it seems that a career total of 174 appearances and 51 goals is not a bad old return. Of course, this doesn't give me assists, and other places would have better stats than that. Currently, at the moment, I think in the Bundesliga, he is on 10 matches, 11 goals, 7 assists in the season to date. That's quite good. 4 matches in the Europa League and 2 goals and 1 assist. And in the Cup, the German Cup, 2 games, 1 goal, 2 assists. So it would appear that the lad is pretty much on fire at the moment, if we're being perfectly honest about it. That seems to be probably an awful lot of the driving force behind the talk. But again, I go back to the fact that he is 25. Does that sound to you like the kind of profile that we were used to be doing? You said something very interesting before we went live here about the attitude of our current manager to player profile ages. Could you loop that into your answer? Because I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, I think that there's the history's been, and we've almost been conditioned to it, shall we say, over our recruitment, that almost like 24 is ancient in football terms, isn't it? It would be younger to sort of build. But again, just based on the information we have, Arne Slot is more, I say that would be wrong to say more comfortable, but used to working with what you would call adult footballers, where he can develop them. If you look at the age profile of the team that way as well. And also, if you think of the targets, Zubimendi is no kid, Trev, is he at all? And, you know, the Chiesa is no, I know Chiesa is opportunistic, but they're no kids. And actually, yeah, some people will say, well, hold on, he's 26 in February. There's that element. Well, you would probably suspect if a 26-year-old comes in the summer, it's probably going to be one of those 28-year-olds moving out, isn't there? So there's a bit of a wage decrease and, you know, aging decrease where it will go that way. And just the other important thing to say as well is, contract-wise, Marmoush will have 2 years left in the summer as well. Frankfurt have been trying to get him to get a new contract signed. So obviously they're in a good negotiating position. But all the suggestions are he's holding off on that for obvious reasons. So you have no doubt Liverpool, if they do have those intermediaries, and maybe just suggesting he doesn't sign that as well. But a 26-year-old, don't think we need to batter an eyelid anymore, Trev, to be honest.
Excellent. Well, that's an interesting one. And I think an awful lot of people are quite high on that as a possibility. The other two names that were mentioned were Semenyo and Mbeumo. And people will be familiar with them from watching the Premier League. So there's obviously going to be a Premier League tax on either of those two. That's how that goes, unless we're lucky enough to be able to take advantage of some sort of weird contract scenario, which you may know a little bit more about than I do. So will you take both of those individually and talk us through those?
Yeah, and you'll probably almost get a pipeline from where we got certain information from a little bit. But Semenyo's an interesting one, and I've seen him for bits with Bournemouth. I won't pretend I watched Bournemouth inside out, but 24. This is very much, Trev, one that the data element is high on, as in the way his output is scaling, to use that type of phrase. And very much the info we're getting is, I'm not saying Semenyo is a definite target. He's definitely going to be there. But very much the data guys are quite high on Semenyo and the way he's profiling. So that is one. I don't know if you want to file it under keep an eye. And I'm not saying that Liverpool are red hot on him like they are Mamouche, but very much that is the info we're getting there. And Mbeumo, because that's another name that came out, and it's important to mention a little bit of the opposite, that he has clearly been looked at. There's no shock, no surprise from that. However, the big thing about Mbeumo's suggestion we've had is that, to use the classic phrase, he might just be outperforming his XG a little bit at the moment and where the stats and bits indicate. So there's almost an element of caution that way for Mbeumo. The other side to say is, it's like you said, Liverpool, we've always had that sweet spot, haven't we, for forwards, somewhere between 40 to 50 million, where they scale up, and it's hard to know what price you would get. Semenyo's got quite a few years left on his contracts, and that probably goes against us. Bournemouth probably aren't going to want to give a sweet deal to Richard Hughes after he left them for Buzz either, are we? So that's a factor at the same time. Mbeumo's been quite clear. He's only got a few years left to go. He said quite clearly he wants to go on to the next level. So there's that. But again, from the information he said that we got, it's very much that from a data side, the leanings towards Semenyo rather than Mbeumo. We just need to be crystal clear on this. This does not mean there's any move, anything's imminent. It's just the bit that we've got very much, especially with Semenyo. He's almost in that 3-year cycle that the data guys like. So he really is one to keep an eye on. And this is me guessing, by the way, people. I don't know this, but if you were guessing me at the summer, and things always change, it wouldn't surprise me if Marmouche was far higher up in the list than Semenyo is, but Semenyo is probably on the list, if that makes sense. And the only other one that I didn't give you, Trev, and I'll throw a freebie tonight because I only got it sort of from the same source. Liverpool also, and I'm probably pronouncing this wrong, there's quite a few clubs like this kid. I've not really seen him, so I'm not going to pretend I know much about him, bar what I'm told. I think it's Tyler Dibbling. I think the right-sided, left-footer attacker, the youngster, only 18 at Southampton. A lot of the big clubs like him, Liverpool are very much asked to be kept informed if anything happens with him, because he does have 2 years left to go in the summer.
Well, putting young Tyler down as a prospect until he is further proven, I just got to ask you something. Do you find yourself excited by those names that were being linked with there? Is there one of them in particular that you're pretty high on? I'm just looking at having a glance there at the comments and see Paul's disgruntled by the idea of at least two of these guys, whether or not they'd be good enough. And look, I'm going to openly admit that Mbeumo, yeah, a good player, but for me, possibly could almost blend into the journeyman thing if Semenyo I've not seen enough of. I don't think anybody has, if they're being perfectly honest. So I'm getting it hard to get too excited about these things. But then again, that's often, like you've pointed out in the past, that's often where we work. That's where our recruitment has been good. Not in the shadows at all, but in the areas where it's a little bit grey and there's potential that has not yet been unlocked. So just to get a last word on this, is there one of those in particular that you're quite high on, or do you think that they are of the standard that we should be courting at this club where we are at the moment?
I do get that people will come out and say these are not sexy names, where Marmoush, they'll see what he's doing in the Bundesliga and in Europe and the free kicks. And I get that there's this sexy element. We like a sexy player on the transfer show, don't we? We like talking about these types of things. However, I like to think that, and there's been people debating when I'm saying like Liverpool like to feel now with the people they've got in charge and Michael Edwards and how he runs the ship, they are the smartest operators. I know people are going to throw this back about contracts, but I think we have to separate what happened a little bit under the previous tenure as to who's in charge now. The people in charge now, and we say this with all the love, the data guys, the nerds, the laptop gurus, whatever you want to call them. If you're going to get these people back in charge, surely you've got to back them, Trev. So to me, if they believe that the data guys have looked at it and think, no, Semenyo is the next Jota, to go up the level, or the next Mane to go up the level, you've got to back them, haven't you? And if they can, price will play a part in this as well, don't get me wrong. But if they can get it in their sweet spot somewhere around that 40 to 50 million, and they do go supernova that way as well, you've got to back them. We have to be honest, there's been transfers in recent years when probably people have thought, really? And look how well some of them have worked out. So if you're going to give the power and the trust in these guys, might as well back them, eh?
I'm fully on board with this, because what's the point otherwise? You're either following a model or you're not following a model. And it seems as if we are embarking on a new version of a 2.0 version of what we were before. And, we kind of have no choice but to be all in and embrace it. And like you say, if we can dig out a couple of Manes along the way, well, happy days. Let's finish with the left back situation, or the defender situation. And there are two names. We'll just get straight to those instead of having too much extended discussion about our current situation in defence. I think it was quite encouraging for people to see Robbo with a bit of a return to form there recently, who might have been a little bit sort of down on where he was. A very solid display in the most recent game, and that's quite heartening, and long may that continue. So, we don't want to overplay the drama of the situation, but it was something that had been standing out. It wasn't just recently. It's been over a couple of seasons that we've been thinking, well, Tsimikas, Robbo, is that an area we could improve? If Robbo's out, is Tsimikas good enough to come in? And we've seen him do good things too. But overall, is it at the Liverpool level that we're challenging for the Champions League and we're challenging for the Premier League at the same time level? And so a lot of people were throwing around a lot of names during the summer. We actually found ourselves playing against one of them recently, and that was quite interesting. But there are two names that I'd like you to delve into a little bit. One is one that we've been linked with for a long time. That's Ait Nouri. Is there anything in that? Is there anything extra in that? Anything new in that? And the other is Kirkes, who was a new one on me until you dropped it on me, because I hadn't seen these stories. So can you talk to us about both of those?
Yeah, Ait Nouri, it's technically he's got 1 year left to go on his deal, but it's one of those ones where there's a club option for Wolves to go another year. So Liverpool did have a big look at Ait Nouri in the summer for whatever reason that, a move was not made. But again, from sort of chasing that up, Liverpool are still, and I don't want to say because people will jump on this, like they definitely go for him, but they're very much aware of him. And they've even kind of suggested that it might not be in his best interest to sign a contract, for this summer or during the season, if a possible move comes up. So that is an interesting one for me. And it was one that came out a lot during the summer. Kirkes, and we talked about the previous regime, Trev. the info we got that Liverpool had a look at Kirkes, you know, when he first came across from out there, a bit wet behind the ears, a bit young, a bit rash in his defending was all the info we got. And that was kind of even the feeling last summer a little bit after a season at Bournemouth, that we still a little bit rash, decision-making was still an element. That was for the previous regime. However, I'm going to be deadly honest, digging around on this sort of over the last week, all the suggestions coming back are that Liverpool well know Kirkes, well know his agents, and are very much being asked to be kept informed of developments and what's happening with Kirkes. And again, there's a few different reports, and you know, people will take the media bits, how they want to. But from digging around genuinely, the bits around Kirkes that Liverpool do have an interest very much. And the only other one to mention that Gary Lineker was the source for that, wasn't he? Where he said Liverpool are very much interested.
What's that about?
Gary Lineker leaving the BBC to become India Kalia's assistant. I'm just going to assume that's his new role going to be going forward, to be honest. Who knows, realistically. But I would kind of ask that as in, like, have you seen what Lineker's been saying? Which came back with, they had a good look at him last summer, you know. I was like, what? Yeah, indeed. Now, but again, and this is my assessment, people. This doesn't mean this is what I've been told. This is my assessment. Again, there's been a regime change, as it is phrased, and things so that doesn't mean, it would, I think it's still the same, but it kind of surprised when it got told, like, yeah, they had a real look at him last summer. So yeah, there's your three names.
I love it. As ever, you have brought the goods, and it's lovely to be doing this show again with you. We've just hit the hour mark, which means I think we should start checking out. We've gotten through all our topics, so well done us. Go team. It's lovely to be back talking transfers and the possibility of us getting some new players in, because most people have given up all hope of such things on the back of last summer. And we won't lie, Dave, it wasn't easy coming on week after week when nothing was happening. And then we had to make do with the little bonus bonanza that was our Italian friend, who we haven't seen since, alas. So a lot of people will be very anxious for something to happen in January, and a lot of people will think that it's absolutely necessary for a title challenge. That was a whole discussion we were going to have. We haven't had time to have it. Maybe we'll sort of shoehorn another one of these ones in if there are any further rumors, because we know you out there. We know you love all the transfer stuff, you massive tarts, and we're exactly the same pair of tarts. That way, this way, I can't remember, whatever direction it's going, we love it as well. So from myself and Dave, for yet another transfer show, take care.